Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Volunteering. My name is Stormy Bell, and I'm glad that you've tuned in for today's episode. I have two of my friends, Nicole Snyder and Sarah Gibbons, who work with the Family Support Line as my guests today. And I'm just so glad that they're able to join us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah, you're the executive director, correct?
Yes.
She leads the Family Support Line under the direction of the Board of Directors with the goal of advancing in the prevention and treatment of child sexual abuse. Along with the program's directors, she ensures that the highest quality of service is provided to children and their families served by the Family Support Line. An experienced nonprofit leader with a wealth of experience in strategic planning, community engagement, program management, and partnership building. Sarah began serving as the executive director in 2019. Prior to serving at the Family Support Line, she worked as the director of community relations at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and as the senior program manager at the Family Planning Council. She's a licensed social worker and earned her master's in social services and master's in law and social policy from Bryn Mawr and her bachelor's of arts degree from Carleton College in women's and gender studies. So thank you for joining us.
Good job. Perfect.
Now, now we already talked about Sarah. Now, Nicole, won't get my notes messed up here, has spent the last decade involved with many nonprofits at the volunteer level. In 2019, she decided to make a career shift from education to nonprofit work full-time and completed a nonprofit management program through the Harvard Extension School. She is currently the development officer at Family Support Line, where she now works with volunteers on a regular basis, in addition to fundraising for the organization. As a staff member with Family Support Line, Nicole currently acts as the liaison with volunteers in the organization. Volunteers contribute as board members, committee members, event volunteers, and most recently are beginning to work with staff and on clerical needs. Welcome. So we're actually recording on a Friday afternoon. So I hope that you've had a wonderful week and have great plans for the weekend. And we're just going to take this pause and just talk a little bit about Family Support Line. We talked about it being sexual abuse with children, child sexual abuse. What does that look like? What do you do? Where did this Family Support Line come from? Just give me a little history about your nonprofit.
So we were formed almost 35 years ago is our incorporation date, although in practice, we've actually been around for 39 years. So 39 years ago, a gentleman had a daughter, unfortunately, that had been sexually molested by her stepfather. He got really frustrated because she was continually telling her story over and over again to all the different people that were part of her case. So both the DA's office, law enforcement, children and youth services, lawyers. She was constantly having to retell her story. And that was in the early 80s. And he got really frustrated because it was continuing to re-traumatize her. She was having to relive the things that had happened to her. And so he worked with a group of pro bono social workers, and they met in church basements and worked with families that had been affected by child sexual abuse to really work through the different traumas that they were experiencing and to help them ensure that their cases were coordinated to try to reduce the level of trauma that they were experiencing. So we became incorporated in 1988. Like I said, we're celebrating our 35th anniversary in a couple of weeks. And the organization has really grown over those last 35 years. We started as a mental health facility where we were providing trauma-informed therapy services and support groups. We've gone to expand to an advocacy center, a children's advocacy center. Those are accredited child advocacy centers that help children with disclosing their stories and only having to tell their story one time to the professionals. So they come into our office, they talk with an experienced interviewer, hopefully they disclose what had happened to them, and law enforcement, child and youth services, and the DA's office are all watching the recording take place, but they're not physically in the room. So that child, it minimizes the trauma is the idea. And then they potentially get referred to mental health services. And then in addition to that, we also have prevention activities that we provide. So we go out into the community and speak to really anybody who's willing to talk to us, including you, about ways that we can prevent child abuse from happening. And child abuse is such an interesting kind of issue, social issue, which we can talk about further. But prevention is a really key piece of this, and so that is another piece of what we do.
Wow, there's a lot in that. Volunteers are part of your delivery model, but are they actually speaking with the clients, or are they more support around what you do?
They're more support, and I'll let Nicole talk about the actual volunteer opportunities, but one of the real challenges with child sexual abuse is that 85 to 90% of our victims know who their offender is, and they have a very close relationship with them. So oftentimes, unfortunately, it's somebody within their home. It could be an uncle, an aunt, a grandfather, a step parent, a mother, a father, a sibling. And so what is very challenging about child sexual abuse is the entire issue brings attention to the family. And so you can imagine somebody that has disclosed about that, how that potentially provides shame or stigma. And that is a really big challenge when it comes to fundraising and growing and developing our programs. We don't have voices in the same kind of way that a lot of other social service providers can say, "Hey, come to our soup kitchen and serve the homeless population that we help. Come to our children's hospital and work with our patients that are experiencing or going through cancer treatments." It's really hard for us because it is such a sensitive topic that it is very hard for children to disclose. And when they do, we really want to make sure that we're protecting their identities, we're protecting their privacy. Only 38% of children actually disclose. Um, and so that's a small number.
It is a
We
small
want to make
number.
sure that we really are protecting their privacy, and that makes it really, really hard um, to fundraise, which is where we can get people who are really interested in helping these kids help us through our fundraising measures.
Right.
And I'll just add too, from that perspective, because the allegation is the abuse when they come into our Children's Advocacy Center is an allegation. Making sure that outsiders are not present during those times when children and their families are in this space around an allegation is of utmost importance. The last thing we want is somebody to be in our space, whether they're volunteering, whether they're coming in for a tour, whatever the case might be, and see a neighbor, see somebody in their religious organization or in the school district that they're at, and see them and their family in that space. Because for us, it's an allegation, and that may never be a founded allegation. But for that community member coming into the space, that memory, that encounter will stay with them forever. So they will always hold that in their hearts and minds when thinking about that person in their community, which again makes it difficult. We get many emails and many phone calls from individuals who say, "I want to volunteer, I want to help, let me figure out a way." And when I get down to the nuts and bolts of things with them, oftentimes what they would like to do is work with the children. They want to work with the families, work with the children, and it's a difficult conversation because it's not something we're in the near future going to allow. And if we do, it's going to be somebody who really has specialized training in that is trauma informed, that has gone through certain certificate programs. We have had females in the social work field reach out that do have some of that criteria. So working with them right now to figure out where they could best fit to help our staff. We're a small staff, relatively speaking. We have about 18 full-time employees on staff, and then additional part-time employees that work predominantly in our therapy and our group therapy sessions. So figuring out where we might be able to have a volunteer come in to support that is amazing. But it's so nuanced with our subject matter and our context that we're dealing with.
And I can see how all that kind of I don't want to say it works against you, but you're talking about fundraising, you talk about volunteers. It's like people want to get involved, but it's the how, it's the
Mhm.
vehicle for that, and be able to share stories without giving away identities, and the
Yeah.
impact that you're making in such a way that people unless you're the family, they may not ever, no one else may never know the impact that you've had in those lives.
Right. Yeah. You know, I've been with the organization a little over a year, and I think Sarah will probably agree I'm an outside of the box thinker.
Right.
So prior to coming in, our volunteerism was board members volunteering their time, committee members volunteering their time for fundraising efforts. But we're seeing a lot of, as we've been creating awareness in the community about who we are and what we do, a lot more people coming to us, corporations wanting to get involved with their corporate responsibility. And so we're really starting to brainstorm and think outside of that traditional box of, how can we engage these people in a
Mhm.
meaningful way? We
Right.
want them to feel that connection. And is there a way for them to feel that connection to that child without them actually physically seeing that child? So that's kind of where we are at right now, especially as we prepare to move into a new building, larger space.
That's awesome. Glad you can
Yeah.
do that. Um, I just think I've done some volunteering. Well, pre-pandemic, did some volunteering up in North Jersey, with the a shelter for women and their children coming out of abusive situations, and they have to be very limited with who they bring in as well, because who knows if who knows them, the women, or children that are there. So they actually had like transitional housing for them. So there's a group of us that would go in and we painted walls. If someone moved out and left things, we went through the things, what could be kept for someone else, what could be donated, or whatever could be discarded. So we were able to help in a way that we did not interact.
Mhm.
Um, but they had physical buildings, and you don't have that type of space to even allow that for volunteers.
It's interesting that you're bringing that up because that is actually, and it's a short term volunteer project, really, but we're moving from, I think we're about 5,500 square feet, and we're going to over a little over 13,000 square feet. So we're doubling in size, and with that comes a lot of need in terms of furniture, in terms of packing and moving. Sarah and I have this vision for our welcome reception area to have like a big mural on the back wall. And painting is one way that I've thought, gosh, we can really engage our volunteers. Have the artists create what that looks like and put it up with a stencil on the outline and have our volunteers come in to take part and take ownership in what that will look like for the children and their families. Um,
Absolutely. I
so
love
that
that.
it's short term, it's not going to be something that will be ongoing, but as we
Mhm.
prepare this new space and really make it a warm and welcoming space for the children and families, there's so much opportunity to have them involved.
We also talked about putting together items of comfort
Mhm.
to help the families. So there's a retirement community that's in our area that put together heart pillows. So they're pillows that are shaped like hearts, and they put that together as a volunteer activity, something that they could do as a group, and they donated them to us. And those heart pillows really meant a lot to the clients that were coming. They would get one, they got to take one home. We've done a lot of drives, volunteer drives, where volunteers can provide different items for children, things of comfort. But we've also talked about even doing different levels of art, or words of encouragement that they can give, whether it's painting those encouraging words on rocks, or
Yeah.
putting together bracelets, or something that can be encouraging for a child, to just let them know that there's people out there that are thinking about them, praying for them, supporting them, just kind of that sense of comfort. is something that we've been discussing that we would like to do.
And I love that idea of this tangible item too, that our volunteers are creating, and it will end up in the hands of the children that we serve too. And I think from that volunteer aspect, because they can't have that face to face with the child, being able to have that moment where what they've created will end up in the hands of a child,
Yes.
it really makes that connection stronger for that volunteer.
So it really forces you, Nicole, to be very creative. Like we talked about a little bit, but you think like again, you said you think out of the box. You really have to create those bridges
Yeah.
from the volunteer to the actual child.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, this is not so much the volunteer side, but with Family Support Line, how far along do you journey with the family? Is it just for that initial telling of their story, or do you have therapy? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, it starts at the prevention level in the community where you may or may not have that interaction. We hope to reach as many people as we can in the community. And that actually is another potential volunteer opportunity. That's something that we're exploring is having volunteers being able to go to different activities where they can provide information to the community. Again, that's another sensitive thing. We need to make sure that we really have our training down for those volunteers because probably 50% chance you're going to have somebody disclosed to you at that event. It happens a lot to our staff, which is why we want to make sure that whoever is going to those events is prepared on how to handle that if something like that happens. So it can be then,
Mhm.
and then of course when they come in for the initial allegation, those are usually one-time things where they're just there for that particular thing. But if they come back for therapy, support groups, they could be coming to our facility for years to go through that. We just had a conversation with our mental health providers right before this. Nicole and I did, and some of the therapists said, that they've been with their families for years because the court case hasn't happened yet. And the family really needs that support. And with COVID, it has really delayed court cases and court conclusions. So these families often have things that happen throughout that process and throughout that journey. And so we're there until they don't need us anymore.
Also just add too, from our Children's Advocacy Center side, where they are coming in that one time, when they come in, they're connected with a family advocate. And that family advocate is essentially a case manager for that child and that family. So they will stay connected to that child and that family throughout that journey until the conclusion through the court system. So they can provide a lot of additional resources. They provide check-ins, can help prepare them for court. In an ideal world, when we're fully staffed, accompany them to court.
Right.
So there's lots of ways that they do stay connected throughout that process, even if the child may go somewhere else for their mental health therapy after they've come to disclose.
Wow. Very impactful work that you're doing. How many, I guess in the 35 years, how many families have you impacted? Do you know?
It's a good question. That is something that we definitely would like to have some kind of ticker to track that. I think for a very long time, this was such a small organization until recently that a lot of stuff was done on paper. It wasn't electronic. I think it would be hard for us to go back.
To go back all the way. Well, then how many do you in a 12-month span, how
Yeah,
many?
absolutely. So right now we're averaging after COVID, we saw a 46% increase in our services that we were providing. So now, or since 2020, we've been seeing about 600 to 800 kids in the CAC. We have done about 420 interviews each year. And then in addition, we see on average about 200 kids for therapy. And that doesn't include the thousands of kids that we see out doing prevention work. But it is, we are, I guess we cover the county of Delaware. So that is our service area.
Okay.
And so when you think about it, 600 kids, allegations of child sexual abuse a year for one county is a lot. So yeah, we've been talking about that as far as like if we could figure out a way to figure out the full impact and the number of kids that we've served. We have electronic data since 2015, so we could at least do it for the last 7 or 8 years,
Right. Right.
and hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point. So, but that's usually about our average.
Okay. And you said only 38% of families are report out.
Yes,
That's kind of just a drop in the bucket to what's really happening in your service area.
it is. It is. So that's a national average, 38%. That
Okay.
is a number that Darkness to Light, which is a organization that does a lot of prevention education for child sexual abuse, has
Mm.
found through their research, 38%. The reason why is because it is such a familial issue. It is somebody that is close. So a lot of times that kid does not want to get the person in trouble. There's a lot of feelings that go on with child sexual abuse, and kids don't always see themselves as a victim. They see themselves as a active, willing participant in the relationship. And it also is something where when you tell a family member, because of that relationship with the alleged perpetrator, it's something that people aren't going to believe. And so that is the challenge that we deal with child sexual abuse is perpetrators of child sexual abuse are very good at building trust and building relationships with the victim and the victim's family. The good news about that from a prevention standpoint is perpetrators take a very long time with grooming that child and grooming that family. It doesn't tend to be like a quick, violent assault that
Right.
happens one night at a sleepover. It tends to be they are constantly testing the limits to see how far they can go with that child. If a child knows through prevention the certain kinds of boundaries and the things that are okay and not okay, hopefully we will catch children that will be open to sharing what is happening way before there is penetration or some kind of violent assault that happens with a child. But that is the one good thing about child sexual abuse is that it tends to happen over a long period of time. And it is something where they are really grooming and building that trusting relationship with the victim and the family. And they do that as a way to continue access. They do it as a way to continue to keep access to that child and to make sure that that child is available to them. And so that is what really complicates things. That's what makes it hard for kids to feel like they can disclose. But like I said, from a prevention side, that's a really good thing because kids, it's teaching kids when things are not okay and to speak out.
Do you go into schools with your
We do.
message? Okay.
We do. We go into schools. We talk a lot about healthy boundaries, healthy relationships. I will use an example of a case that happened a couple of years ago where there was an employee that was trying to groom children, and he exposed himself to those children, and they knew that it was wrong, and they said that's disgusting. Went home and told their parents. If they had been in a different situation where he had been slowly, apparently he was a fantastic employee. Everyone loved him. The children loved him. The families loved him. This was a big shock to the community when it came out. But the good thing is through prevention, those kids knew that that was not okay. And so that is the stuff that we really want to try. And when you talk about the things that we're really looking, Nicole and I are looking to grow with this organization is really to step up our prevention, to give those tools to community members, to families, to professionals, to children, so that they know when that stuff is happening to them and they know when to say, no, that's not okay.
Oh, that's tremendous. Yeah, knowledge is power.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And let me take a step back. Let's talk about since we are the I can't even talk. The art of volunteering is so hard because there's such weight with what we just spoke about. I'd like to hear about your volunteer journeys, where you've been, what brought you to this. Nicole, especially, let me start with Nicole, because you were volunteering and you've shifted into leading volunteers. What does your journey look like?
Yeah. So for me, I was a special educator before we had children, and I was always involved in groups like the Junior League and similar volunteer groups. I put a full speed ahead into volunteering when my second child was born with congenital heart disease. So that was my way to sort of pull myself up by the bootstraps and stay grounded when we were in a tough spot from a medical standpoint with my daughter. So that's how I kept myself grounded. And I fell in love with volunteering, with fundraising. I did it for a very long time in the children's medical space for heart organizations, for local children's hospitals. And now that I've taken the shift to make this like a full-time career in the development side in nonprofit, I find myself. How many clubs, Sarah, have we joined lately? I find myself volunteering with various organizations, and I really
At
love.
least 4.
At
Yeah,
least
with it was locally, I'm a member of the Saturday Club, which is the oldest women's club in the US. Project W, which is a women's giving circle in Delaware County. Springfield Junior Women's Club. Our organization has had a membership with the Rotary Club of Media for a very long time as well, to stay involved within that space.
100 Women Philadelphia.
Yes, 100 Women Philadelphia, which is another women's giving circle. And for me, a lot of that is my job intersecting those pieces as well. It's a way for me to continually advocate for Family Support Line. We often, with Project W, I have had friends that I've met through those organizations who've become volunteers with Family Support Line. So they have joined our auction committees. In particular, they've found joy in joining us in that realm. But for me, it's when I'm not focused on it from the work aspect, that's how I stay grounded with work stuff. I can shift my gears and not talk about child sexual abuse all day and talk about the ways that we are volunteering or fundraising, but I can focus on another nonprofit's issue and way that I can give back. Yesterday, for example, I spent 2 hours with the Springfield Junior Women's Club. They had a Halloween parade. And, as Sarah and I were mentioning, we're moving to this new space. We're moving at the end of November. It's like a high stress time when you were moving an entire office over. And I cannot tell you, my son helped me last night. I love getting my kids involved when we do, when it's appropriate to bring them along. And he helped. And the two of us walked back to the car with our arms around each other. We just felt so fulfilled. And it was like a simple activity. And the proceeds that they've made go back into the community. But it kept me grounded from a personal standpoint when I needed it. And now it also keeps me grounded from that personal standpoint, even as I am involved on the nonprofit side as a professional. So I love to do as much as I can. Sometimes I have to learn to say no.
That is a skill every woman needs to know.
Yes.
Guys too, but women tend to be the ones who say yes an awful lot more.
Yeah, right. Yes.
But it's also struggling between the people who say no too much. You don't want to come across as cold.
That's true.
It's hard. I mean, I feel like as a woman, you can't win.
No, I agree. All right, Sarah, you're up. Tell me about your volunteer journey.
So I've always been in the nonprofit world. I was raised by 2 ordained ministers in central Pennsylvania. So I learned at an early age how important it was to give back to the community. And when I went to college, all the way in Minnesota, the college that I went to really instilled its students to understand our privilege as far as going to a very highly rated liberal arts college to use that information, that knowledge, that intellect that we had to really give back to the community. And that is one of the things that Carleton has a legacy for. People graduate and they're like, I want to save the world. That's really the mentality that they put into people's minds. And so I went into Carleton thinking I was going to be like a genetic counselor making a lot of money using my expensive degree from liberal arts. And I graduated thinking I want to work for a nonprofit and make a difference. And I'm not the only one. At Carleton, there's a long line of people that do that. And so I did nonprofit work. I've always known nonprofit work. That's pretty much my entire career. Actually, that is my entire career, is working for nonprofits. And through that, you get exposed to a lot of other organizations that are doing things. And like Nicole, I enjoy giving back. I love interacting with a lot of people that like to give and they like to do things. I like hearing the stories. I like being able to get my hands dirty and do things. It is hard though. It is a balance. I am constantly wanting to join different things, meet people. And I think one of the things that's challenging for our generation, Nicole and I are about the same age, is really there's not enough people volunteering. And I think the issue that I'm facing is there's so many people that are saying no that I feel like I have to do everything. And so just recently, to give you an example, my son is in Boy Scouts. And I remember how good of an experience I had with mentors when I was growing up through scouting and other activities. And I really didn't want him to not have that opportunity. So both me and another mother of our den volunteered to do it because we really didn't want to see that go away. But the challenge of finding people that are willing to step up and willing to volunteer is really a challenge. And, as much as I enjoy it and as much as I love it, I feel like there's so many opportunities that are going unfulfilled because people just aren't stepping up.
I think we're seeing that more after COVID too, to an even greater degree than before. It had been, I've seen a decline, but as with many things, COVID exacerbated it.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Getting people outside of their home is sometimes a challenge.
It's hard. I mean, a lot of the people that I volunteer with are at retirement age or older, and they're very concerned, what's going to happen when they pass away? Where are these young people? Why aren't they stepping up and doing things? And, I think COVID, now that we're kind of back into our routines, we're seeing what it was like to not have those crazy routines. And now we're having to go back to that. And I know there were lots of people that volunteered to do stuff during COVID. And then when they had to go back to work, like physically go into the office again, and they were having those commutes, they were slashing their volunteer stuff because it just seemed like it was too much.
Yeah. And we've seen too some people who I'm thinking of one volunteer in particular. When we tried to engage her a little bit further, she's very happy to do things on the virtual level. But when we asked her if she wanted to do something a little bit more in person, it was no, it was a hard no and a respected no. But people have set up boundaries to protect their personal space, to protect their physical space. And so it's interesting to see the post-COVID volunteer world. And then you've got the Sarahs and the Nicoles who are like, okay, well then just sign me up for 5 extra shifts.
And then you see her graying hair.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, next question. Either of you, both of you. In your volunteering, it could be from the family support line, or it can be one of the organizations that you work with. Can you share a story of impact that you have seen directly from your volunteering to an outcome? And what does that look like?
I'll start. So at Family Support Line, we have a Winter Wishes program. It's something that we engage outside volunteers to sponsor a family during the holiday season, during the winter season. Our team will put together a list in conjunction with those families of wants and needs. And we match them with donors and volunteers to go out and purchase the items, to come into our space and help compile them. And this past year, write notes of encouragement so that there was that connection between the family, the person, and the individual, since they weren't physically handing those gifts out. I will tell you, I personally adopted a family. I adopted a gentleman and his son. Um, and the joy of taking my kids to the store to purchase those items, um, it was the first time, because I have four, my oldest is 11, my youngest is 5, that all four of them got to really participate in something actively like that since COVID. And so going out to the store and being able to, work through this list as a team was awesome. On the flip side, I got to see the back end of it. And I got to hear from our family advocate the emotion from the family after receiving those items. And so we, again, because we protect that family, so the donor is typically not the person giving that gift, it's a staff
Right.
member, and they never typically will get that feedback because it's private as well. And we learned from this experience that it's probably better not to, even though I was a staff member. But what this staff member shared was this family, the gentleman was so emotionally impacted by the gifts that they received. Nobody had ever done anything for them like that. He's going through a divorce. He's also transitioning his gender, and his child was sexually abused and mentally abused. So what they're going through as a family is a tremendous transition and shift. And so for them to get those gifts was really what they needed at that moment. And she shared that the joy that the father and the son had getting these items and these bags, they looked at each other and they came up with a plan that throughout the month of December, they would each choose one item in the bag to share with the other family member. And they would do that on a daily basis, because part of the child's abuse was that he was denied holidays from the abuser. And he was not, those were punishments. He had Halloween taken away. He would not receive Christmas presents. And so this was the first time dad was able to provide that for his son. And so I loved the fact that they were going to be able to do this all month long with things like socks. I mean, with things like, essential items. And so that impacted me. That was both personal and work. And I think about that often. You're up, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot of crossovers with your children. And I have 3 children too. My children are 12, 9, and 7. And as much as you try to teach your kids kindness and to be a good person, there still is an element of privilege that they have regardless. And seeing my children having experiences with other people, whether it's neurodivergent people, whether it's people of different incomes, different cultures, all of that, to see the exposure and to see how they react, I think is so important to me, and is really something that I value with my kids' interactions. I also think volunteering too helps me understand that there is a level of need and joy that people have that is not just about things, that has been really valuable to me. We actually are housing a family from Honduras right now, and the single mother has a 22-month-old child and an 8-year-old daughter, and we actually went last night on a hayride. They had never been on a hayride before. The little girl thought it was the greatest thing. She's like, "This is my best day ever." We each kid got a little pumpkin, and my kids, it's like, that's another day, right? But to those 2 children, it was so meaningful. And this morning, the 22-month-old came up the stairs holding his pumpkin. And he was so proud to show the babysitter his pumpkin. And, my kids' pumpkins are probably who knows where they are. But I think it's nice to see just the layers and the complexities of people's lives, um, regardless of whether or not they have the means, but just having those interactions with people and knowing that there is kindness and there's ways that you can contribute and make a difference. Um, it is so fulfilling to me to have a child that is um, grateful and happy for just trying to teach them English words that they didn't know, to watch my kids interact with them and help them do things. I know we were in the car the other day and my son said, "Turn up the heat." And the 8-year-old goes, "What's heat?" And so it's just really neat to see those kinds of things. And, that takes a lot of effort, yes, but I think it's just really great to see the interactions and what you can do for other people.
I love it. I love the incorporating of the families into the experience because that's how they pick the mantle up for when
Mhm.
they're making decisions in their lives to give back and to help someone else, no matter the background. That they're someone always needs someone else to just give them a cup of water, helping them a hand to help them up a step, as simple as
Mhm.
that, or as complex as some of these
Yeah.
relationships are. All right. My last hard question. I think it's kind of fun, but not everyone does. Can you tell me a blooper? Something that didn't go wrong, but maybe didn't go as planned or as you thought it was going to. And what did you learn from it?
So I'll go first.
Okay.
And Nicole probably knows what I'm going to say because this is like a blooper. Sometimes when we're out talking about what we do, um, we are kind of like deer in headlights, right? People will come up and say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Or "Tell me what you do." And, if I'm not thinking because of the sensitive nature of what we do, sometimes I just say, "Oh, we do child sexual abuse." And then I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like that is like such a, like bad way of saying it. And I've had to consciously be remembering we serve children that have been affected by child sexual abuse. And sometimes in the moment when people are like, "What do you do?" And people are like, "Oh, construction," or "I'm a doctor," or whatever. And I'm like, "I do child sexual." No, I don't do child sexual abuse. But, I think it's like one of those things, right? That is, you have to consciously, with this job, you have to consciously think about how you answer that question of what
Yeah.
do you do? So that's my blooper, which hopefully is fun.
That's your blooper.
Yeah.
It is
I
fun.
think
I like how you said it. All right, Nicole, what do you have a blooper?
my blooper is literally keeping things like straight in my head right now, between all of the various clubs and volunteer um organizations. It's making sure it's maybe the pre-blooper so that you don't show up in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Okay.
Because it is like I'll get in the car and think I'm going to be going one place. This is not for work, Sarah. So this is like after school volunteerism, after school, after work. And get in the car and think like, oh, I've got this meeting, it's a whatever, thinking it's like a Wednesday night, but really it's a Tuesday night and it's a different meeting for a different club. And it's constantly like, okay, I'm about to plug in into my GPS the location for one space, and I've got to be like, let me pull out my calendar right now and see where am I going? Because I'm often, whether it's for work or for
Yeah.
personal right now, the calendar is so full with so many commitments that it is like, make sure you check that calendar. Otherwise, I know if I'm not
Mhm.
doing it, I'm going to end up in that wrong spot.
I love it. I can appreciate that. What day is it and where am I supposed to be?
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we're almost done with our conversation. It's been a wonderful conversation. So now I'm going to give you both the opportunity to love on Family Support Line. Why people should volunteer in the ways that they can, why they should uh, share your information with the people around them to bring awareness, or why they should just support you financially because of what you do. You have the floor.
All right, Sarah, you start.
I'm going to start. Okay. I don't think I had any concept of how complex child sexual abuse is until I started working for this agency. I think there's so much misinformation. I think there's so much um, just cloaks that cover this topic. You know, Nicole and I will go to events and we'll say, you know, we work with children that have been sexually abused, and sometimes people are intrigued, but a lot of people figure out a way to like turn around and walk away from you. You know, I think it's one of those topics that people don't want to discuss because of the sensitive nature of it. And the fascinating thing is that there's so much, and you saw this today when we were going through our conversation. There are so many layers and complexities to it that I had absolutely no idea, no understanding of. And the whole issue is just fascinating when you look at it from a family standpoint, relationships, trauma, the things that happen to children who don't disclose that end up having a lot of mental health challenges, substance abuse, and other things when they're older. It really is a prevention measure. Preventing child sexual abuse prevents a lot of different social things later in life. And so for me, I see it as a prevention. I see it as a way to stop a lot of the social ills that we are facing as a community, as a country, and even as a world. So for me, I see it as very, very big as far as an important kind of thing or topic that I care about. And I wish that it was something that people paid attention to in the same kind of way that they pay attention to other abuse, like animal abuse, domestic abuse. How many times, Nicole, do we talk about how it's so easy for domestic abuse organizations to be successful with fundraisers, or it's so successful for people to give to animal abuse organizations? But when you're talking about child sexual abuse, it's not that same kind of openness and acceptance into giving money or supporting an organization openly. With Facebook, we have a great social media person who does an amazing job. We have a lot of people who troll our social media, but not a lot of people that want to comment or like our things just because
Troll in
they
a
don't
positive
even.
way. Positive
Yes,
trolling.
positive trolling, but they don't want to be affiliated or associated with us. They don't want to show that they're supporting an organization that helps children that have been sexually abused. So it's really a fascinating topic, and I'm so glad that we were able to talk about it today because more people need to know that it's here and what happens when those children don't get help.
And you know, just to kind of carry on about what Sarah was saying about, you know, um, helping people understand, like those of you who are listening today, when you see something like Sarah's just mentioning on social media and it resonates with you, um, like it and share it. It may be uncomfortable, it may be outside of your comfort level, but raising awareness is only going to happen when people are sharing and liking and spreading that awareness. And I think that's one of the big things that I have really enjoyed the most about my position with Family Sportline this past year. We're going on our 35th anniversary, but many of those years we have gone under the radar. We have flown under the radar really because we were protecting the children we serve, but people didn't know our logo, they didn't know our mission, they didn't know who we are, what we stood for until really Sarah and I were getting ourselves out there, getting on a soapbox whenever possible to speak to people about what we do. And Sarah and I give a lot of tours. We are always happy to open the doors to anybody, corporate people, citizens, community members who are interested in wanting to learn more or figure out ways that they can volunteer with us. Always happy to walk them through the process and give them a tour. Raising that awareness and having people come in and having people learn about the nuances of our organization has had a 100% success rate, Sarah. And I say those individuals or groups or teams that come through, it has led to financial contributions. It has led to opening doors to other partners, whether that be corporate, whether that be political, whether that be, with our politicians, state and federal grant funding, that they are saying, well, you know what, actually, I know about this pot of money that you could access.
Right.
It has led to we had one woman in this community behind where our new space will be. She came to our groundbreaking. She was one member of this community. She then reached out and said, would you come, Nicole, and speak to our social club? We have a social club within our condominium community. Would you come and speak to us? Absolutely. I love raising awareness for what we do, and we're going to be neighbors. I walked away feeling so impacted by that conversation because this group of 20, it was one male, so 20 mostly women, um, they had so many ideas of how they want to support us. They are going to do ongoing drives for items of comfort for our room to heal. They would, they're actually going to put little welcome bags together for every staff member for when we move into the space. They're going to go out and get takeout menus, coupons from restaurants and businesses because we're moving to a new town and we're not familiar with our surroundings as a staff. We talked about group therapy and the possibility of them bringing in a hot meal for our group therapy clients on those nights. And then again, they want to come in and figure out how they can volunteer. And I said to Sarah, like, because they just struck me in my heart so fiercely, I said, like, let's figure out how we can make it happen. We have this room to heal. It's going to be in a large room. Let's figure out a way for these ladies to come in on a monthly basis and help our staff member unbox items that come in and organize that room to heal. Figure out a way that is meaningful to those women and that community that also benefits us. And so, I think every time we go out and we are delivering awareness discussions about our organization, it has led to something positive and really exciting.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking with both of you. I think my listeners will walk away with a whole new perspective and understanding on child sexual abuse, and just to become advocates in their own communities, and bring awareness and help just wherever they are to help raise the awareness for families to know that there is help out there and
Mhm.
it's available and it's free help. So it's not like it's something they have to be concerned about if they're going to make rent or if they're going to get therapy or be able to stand with their children to make the allegation, as you mentioned. So thank you to my listeners. I hope you found as much value in today's conversation as I did. And I look forward to seeing you next time on The Art of Volunteering. Thank you.